morning. Thank you for joining us. Today is June 22nd, 2022 for a regular scheduled Board of County Commission Zoning Comprehensive Plan meeting. And if you could please stand and join us to pledge allegiance and also a prayer by Commissioner Hammond. Do the prayer.
Everyone, if you could please bow your heads. Let's start with a moment of silence to remember Commissioner Frank Mann, and then we'll close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for Commissioner Frank Mann, for the service that he dedicated to Lee County. Father, we are so grateful for him, for his family, and for their contributions to making this one of the best counties to live in. God, I know that he looked after your creation, he looked after the environment, he looked after the animals, and God, we will miss him. I pray that you would give his family the strength and the peace and the comfort that they need as they mourn him throughout the coming days and weeks. And Father, I pray for all of us as commissioners this morning that you would give us wisdom and discernment to make great decisions for the people that you've called us to serve. It's in your Son's name we pray these things. Amen.
Amen. Trying to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Back, everybody, silence your cell phone. We're going to get started with the first case. Anthony?
Commissioners, good morning. For the record, Anthony Rodriguez, zoning manager with community development. We have 4 zoning cases, 1 comprehensive plan amendment case, and 1 development agreement case for you. So with that said, I will introduce Adam Mendez, who's going to present our first case this morning. Adam?
Good morning, Commissioners. The case before you is Bayshore 22. Case number is DCI 2021-0032. The property is located adjacent to the Love's Travel Stop in the southwest corner of the Bayshore Road and I-75 interchange area. The property's address is 17200 McDowell Road in the North Fort Myers Planning Community. The request is to rezone 22 acres from tourist commercial to commercial plan development to allow general commercial and residential multifamily uses. The hearing examiner's recommendation is approval, subject to conditions, and there were no participants of record. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just briefly on this one. I see there's a scenario A and a scenario B. If we approve the hearing examiner's recommendation today, are we approving both scenarios as a possibility for this land?
Yes, Commissioners. Scenario 1 will be the commercial, and scenario 2 will be the mixed use with the residential in the back parcel.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff? We have no participants of record. Would the applicant wish to address the board? No? Okay, we'll come back to the board for a motion.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
We have a motion. We have a second with Commissioner Wayne. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you. Next case.
Okay, next case this morning is DCI 2021-00034. This is a Oriole Road IPD. This is a request to rezone approximately 32.31 acres from agricultural AG2 to industrial plan development IPD to allow for a maximum of 1 million square feet of commercial, industrial, and retail uses. The hearing examiner did recommend approval with conditions, and again, there are no participants of record on this case. The staff and the applicant are here with any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? Would the applicant wish to address the board?
Thanks, just here for questions.
Thank you. We'll come back to the board for a motion.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion. We have a second, Commissioner Sandelli. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Next case.
Next case this morning is DCI 2021-00039, Plantation Idlewild Residential Plan Development. This is a request to rezone approximately 17.14 acres from agricultural AG2 to residential plan development RPD to allow for a maximum of 60 single-family residential dwelling units and associated accessory uses. Property is located on Plantation Road, at the intersection of Plantation Road and Idlewild Street. The hearing examiner did recommend approval with conditions. There was a clarification memo to the hearing examiner's recommendation in your packet relative to deviation 8. So any motion of approval, we would ask that it includes that recommendation. Again, approval with conditions from the HEX and 5 participants of record on this case. And staff and the applicant are here for any questions.
Great. Any questions for staff at this time? No? Okay, would the applicant wish to address the board before we call public comment?
The applicant's here to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. We'll call the first participant of record will be Rhonda Brewer. Is Rhonda Brewer here? Bernie Cruz, Mike Kelly, Charles Mayhew, Russell Walton. We'll come back to the board for there's no participants of record. For a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval with conditions inclusive of the clarification memo that was issued.
Okay, we have a motion.
I will second that.
We have a second, Commissioner Wang. Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case.
Next case this morning is the last zoning case of the day, DCI 2021-00017, Packing House Road Event Center. This is a request to rezone approximately 2 acres from agricultural AG2 to commercial plan development CPD to permit the development of a private event center on the property. The hearing examiner did recommend approval with conditions. The hearing examiner recommendation noted that there is the need for the master concept plan to be revised to reflect correct deviation numbers and correct calculations for parking. The master concept plan that you see on this slide here is a corrected master concept plan consistent with that requirement. There were 11 participants of record on this case, and staff and the applicant are here for any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? No? Okay, would the applicant wish to address the board before we?
I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. We'll go for the witnesses of participants of record. George Alston, Connie Dennis, and the next after Connie will be James Dickerson.
I'm Connie Dennis, and I'm now president of Alva Inc. I just want to offer my condolences to all of you and to all the Lee County employees. We are going to miss Frank very much in Alva. On February 8th, Veronica Martin did a presentation on a zoning change for the Packing House Road. The participants in our meeting had a lot of concerns. One was parking. Where would people park if there's a large crowd? This is for a wedding venue. The property is listed for sale. If sold, could the property have a different purpose? Do all the neighbors know about it? And what about the noise level and the possible hours affecting the neighbors? Would this be an opening to permit other commercial establishments in neighborhoods that are zoned agricultural? These are their questions. Packing House Road is rural, with large lots and homes with different kinds of animals as well as children. The proposed event center is halfway down the road. It's a former monthly meeting place for lodge members located in a former house. It's on a 2-lane road with traffic problems regarding speed. The speed limit is 35 miles per hour, and early morning traffic is at least 50 to 50 miles per hour because drivers are taking a shortcut to Joel Boulevard via Tuckahoe Road, thus avoiding 2 traffic lights. The same problem is in the evening, and this shortcut takes place all the time for those who use that route. And the residents are very upset about the speeding cars. The plan for rezoning this property follows the Northeast Lee County Community Plan, including establishing and maintaining a rural character. However, the Alva Community Plan, 28.1.4, states that commercial development must be designed to minimize impacts on surrounding existing and future residents and agricultural areas. The nature of the purpose of this building poses problems for the existing residents. One major concern is the change in noise level. The maximum permission sound level by receiving land use in Lee County is 66 decibels from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for residents, public space, agricultural, or institutional. The limit from 10 p.m. to 7 p.m. is 55 decibels. The average dance music decibel range is 85 to over 100 decibels. Can you imagine hearing the same wedding march and related wedding songs every weekend? How is a buffer of a few new trees and a few plants going to change this?
Connie, everybody gets the same amount of time. Your time is up. Thank you, though. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, James Dickerson. James not here. Denise Ibril. Good morning.
Good morning, and I too would like to share my condolences for the passing of Frank Mann. We liked him in Alva quite a bit, very much. My name's Denise Eberly, and I'm here to talk about the Packing House Road changes to that area. First off, I'd like to say that there was a petition given to the zoning people about the people that did not want to have that turned into commercial. So I'll just read off this. This goes against everything that Alva Inc. and Alva citizens stand for. It is the immense disruption of the rural neighborhood's peace, quiet, privacy, and tranquility offered. This goes against the rural lifestyle chosen by its citizens. The immense increase in traffic, noise, lights, loud music is a grand disruption to daily life. The residents walk their dogs, ride their bikes, walk and jog on this road. The quiet, peaceful evenings disturbed. The large increase in garbage dumpsters will emit putrid odors, attract rodents, flies, maggots, and waste management pickup is only once a week. The health and safety of neighbors will be directly impacted by this. And we also have questions about how they came to the parking spots for 120 to 167 people. Right now, that's a very small area. The most they could probably get in there is 20 cars. And so a lot of changes would have to be made. My question is, if you have all these zoning laws, why not stick to them? Why do we always give variances to these? The reason these people can't we all live in Alva is for the peace and quiet and the rural community and the beauty of it. It's a great disservice to put this event center in there. As Connie said, the music is loud, you know, the traffic, the disruption to a neighborhood and street that is rural. It is agricultural. It is not commercial. It's a side street. It's not on Highway 80. It's not right even close to Highway 80. It's right in the center of that street. So it's a disruption to the community. This, if approved, would set a future precedent to allow more commercial businesses in quiet, peaceful, tranquil rural neighborhoods. This is indeed a threat to the standards of Alva and its rural lifestyle, a great disturbance and disservice to the meaning of rural lifestyle. And then as we went to Community Plan 28, 1.4, commercial development must be designed to minimize impacts on surrounding, existing, and future residential and agricultural areas.
Denise, I'm sorry, your time's up.
Okay,
Your light's on.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Next is Jennifer Edish. Jennifer? Paul Furby? And it's so the speakers, we've never been here before, there's three lights. Green light is telling you to talk, yellow tells you you've got 30 seconds left, and then the red light means your time's up. And the speakers do not have to touch the microphone, it's all set. If you touch it, it turns it off. So thank you. Good morning, Paul.
Morning. I'll make mine real short because our president, Connie, and Denise have covered a lot what I would have covered. My biggest concern is the fact some of the information that the hearing examiner was given may be a little bit off. She quotes that the Alva Diner, which is commercial, located on 80, is nearby. Well, it's not quite nearby the site that the applicant wants to set up an event center in. It's 4/10 of a mile. So you got a commercial zone in Alva Diner, but we're going to move a commercial operation down past 6 homes on Packing House Road that's 4/10 of a mile off of 80. So it's not exactly nearby a commercial operation already. My other concerns are the fact that deviations, one of the particular deviations I'm concerned about is the one backing out on to Packing House Road. It may seem simple to back out of the parking space out in front of the event center. It may be simple during the daytime. What about at 10 o'clock at night when they're closing, or when people are leaving at 10:30? It never closes exactly. People don't always leave exactly at 10 o'clock. It may be an hour before they leave. So they're going to back out on a darkened road, very narrow road, 2-lane, single road that is very narrow, no traffic lights, no lights of any type. Going to make it very problematic for people backing out, possibly causing some kind of an accident. My biggest concern also is that the fact this was never a commercial zone. This was a lodge. It was a fraternity for members of the Woodsmen of the Lodge. I was a guest there 2 times in the mid-'80s to late '80s. And it was more of getting together of members, having a barbecue, talking about what's going on in the neighborhood, what every member's doing. There may be members that talked about who's growing the best oranges, or who's growing the best tomatoes, or the best watermelons, or who's been hunting and what they've been hunting, or who's been fishing. There was no commercial operation going on at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Roxanne Gauze. After Roxanne, it will be Richard Reed.
There you go. All right. Gentlemen, my name is Roxanne Goss. I'm a director at Alva Inc., and I have been asked to speak for the Packing House residents. These residents are requesting that the Board of County Commissioners reject deviation to consumption on premises with 500 feet of a dwelling as stated in 34-1264. And those are the residents that I actually went and talked to, and they asked me to speak for them. So here's 500 feet looking south on the north end. So here's the problem. TCM's master concept plan dated in 2021, I gotta go to my notes, requested a deviation from this ordinance stating that there were only 3 houses within 500 feet from the event center, with distances ranging from 174 feet to 373 feet from the event center. But according to your ordinance, the distance has to be measured in a straight line from any public entrance or exit of the establishment to the nearest property line and dwellings. And so I did that, and off of Lrtp's map, and there are actually 9 houses, and the closest, if you follow your ordinance, is 62 feet, which is directly across the street from the event center. So here, the results of this TSCM's MCP was that in the Lee County staff report, Mr. Hahn listed the incorrect number of houses and their distances, and he also approved deviation to using this incorrect information. And in hearing examiner's report, she granted the applicant's request for a deviation of the ordinance, but she noted in a footnote that members of the public questioned the appropriateness of deviating from the 500-foot requirement and stated that, quote, that requests to deviate are routinely granted if applicants demonstrate compliance with LDC deviation criteria. But TCM wasn't in compliance by using incorrect information. So there's a neighborhood. This picture to the right is the one on the south boundary looking north. And also, this donkey here lives exactly across the street, right in underneath the power lines, and there's goats and everything else. So TCM report was misleading in stating that only 3 houses is at a much greater distance who would be impacted by consumption of alcohol, both indoors and outdoors within the event center, when actually there was one as close as 62 feet. So the entire neighborhood on Packing House Road consists only of single-family residential homes and small ranches with farm animals consisting of horses, cattle, donkey, goats, etc.
Roxy,
There,
your time's up. Thank you. I'm sorry.
we think
Thank
BOC should
you.
follow that.
Thank you. Next speaker is Richard Reed. Is Richard Reed here? Mark Robbins. Emily Smith. Dan Sprague. That's the last participant record. We'll come back to the board. Does the applicant wish to address the board?
Anthony, just a minute, please. Can you put up my PowerPoint presentation? Good morning. For the record, Veronica Martin with TDM Consulting, representing the applicant today. I did prepare a full presentation, but I want to address the comments that the public made.
How long is your presentation?
About 7 minutes. Would you like to hear the whole thing?
You just get to the points.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, the hearing examiner did place several conditions on the approval. This is the proposed master concept plan that is consistent with the hearing examiner's recommendations for minor corrections. We are providing enhanced buffers to the north and the east. Because this property is in the mixed-use overlay, smaller buffers are required. One of the other conditions that we proposed, that the applicant proposed, is that the schedule of uses cannot be changed administratively. It must go back through this public hearing process. So the fact that this property has a very limited schedule of uses that is just for a private event center with a maximum intensity of 6,000 square feet that does include the existing lodge, the existing chapel, and the playhouse, limits how this property can be developed. One of the members of the public talked about parking backing out into the right-of-way and the deviation that we requested. Currently, this site does not have any parking. So people who do visit this site park along the right-of-way and do back out into Packing House Road. As you can see from the master concept plan, we have proposed 2 parking areas on the north and south side of an existing drive aisle. That drive aisle goes to a residential property to the west. It's a huge agricultural lot with a single-family home. Because of that, we needed a deviation to allow those cars to back out into that drive aisle. They are not backing out into the right-of-way. This lodge for the Woodsman's Lodge of the World was built and developed in the 1960s prior to the Land Development Code. The current Land Development Code would consider that a commercial use. We're asking to redevelop this site to bring it into full code compliance with buffers, with parking, with a dumpster pad, to allow the nearby residents and the Alva community to use this for events. Not just wedding events, but it can be community events, birthday parties, family reunions, things like that. The COP, the applicant is not required to get a deviation for a COP when that service is interior to the building, like a restaurant. As you can see, the existing lodge will be converted into the bridal prep area, and then the actual event center is on the west side next to the chain link fence. The interior of the site, as you can see, there's a deviation number 4. That's the outdoor COP area, and that's where we're asking for the deviation to be within 500 feet. So the distance and the interpretation of the code is a little bit confusing, I understand that. However, we did receive full staff support We did receive full support from the hearing examiner. She did recommend approval with the conditions. She found that the deviations did enhance the objectives of the plan development. The conditions were enough to safeguard the public safety, welfare, and interest. And I'm going to follow up with the fact that this property is in the mixed-use overlay. So when I talked to Rick Burris with the Planning Division, asking him how could this property in Alva be in the mixed-use overlay, he said the Alva community agreed to this back in 2006. It was codified in 2008. So this property is in the Alva mixed-use overlay, which does permit commercial uses. As conditioned, we do believe that this project should be granted approval for a CPD. I
Thank
can
you.
answer
Any
any
questions
questions.
from the board, from the applicant? Okay, great, thank you. Back to the board, we had no other participants of record. Bring discussion, our motion.
Mr. Chairman, maybe to get the discussion started, I'll ask a couple of questions real quick. You know, one of the things, I tried to listen really good to what the participants of record talked about today as their concerns, and definitely it seemed like the overriding concern was this idea that this could be a really commercialized corner in the middle of an agricultural or more currently more rural area. So I guess the question that I have, maybe it's for our community development department to answer. So the land use, the underlying land use of this area is actually called central urban, and it is within the mixed use overlay. So what does that mean when something has a designation of central urban and it's in a mixed use overlay? Like what does that mean for the future and the vision of what this area should grow up to be?
Sure. So, Commissioner, this particular property is located in the urban community future land use category, which if you're ranking future land use categories that are established in the Lee Plan by relative intensity of use, falls toward the top. It's probably the third or the fourth most intense type of future land use category. It allows commercial uses, which is consistent with what's being proposed by the applicant today. Furthermore, the mixed-use overlay provides some relaxed development standards, relaxed buffer standards, and relaxed parking standards to facilitate redevelopment. And that's the whole purpose of that mixed-use overlay area.
So it was visioned in our Lee plan and in our plans when we put this in the mixed-use overlay, and it sounds like this happened in 2008 that it got in the mixed-use overlay, so even prior to many of us getting here. But so it was envisioned that this area would grow up with a mixture of uses and potentially commercial uses then when it was added to the plan?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for those comments. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you'll indulge me, I wanted to ask our county attorney to explain part of it. In the hearing examiner's recommendation, she says the law prioritizes consistency with the Lee plan above zoning compliance. What does that mean?
The concept that I believe she was getting at is the number one review when you're looking at zoning is the first review is compliance with the comprehensive plan. And the conversation you just had with Mr. Rodriguez is just that, whether it meets the urban category and the mixed-use overlay and any other policies and objectives that apply. It appears from the reason for the actual comment that you referred to is that there was reference to this is an agricultural zone property and it should stay ag, and it's not going commercial is not appropriate with an ag use. And well, that may make some sense logistically. That's not the underlying concern with regards to whether or not to approve a rezoning. The first thing is, does it meet the urban category, and is it consistent with the mixed-use overlay and any other policies and objectives? That's where I think the purpose of that comment was from.
What could be the potential consequences of not respecting the underlying compliance with the underlying land use?
Well, the first reasoning is if you're not consistent with the comprehensive plan, we'd have to identify how you wouldn't be consistent with it. As an urban category, as Anthony correctly indicated, it envisions a more intense use than what's being proposed today. So to provide that the use that's being requested today is inconsistent when more intense uses are permitted would be a stretch. We'd have to find some compelling evidence to support that position. And then ultimately, if you deny a request that is consistent with the underlying zoning, not the underlying zoning, the underlying comprehensive plan, consequences could be obviously lawsuits and further damages down the road.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then one last question, just for the comfort of some folks, because I do think they're concerned about how the uses could change over time. So if I'm reading it right, could any of the uses from what they're proposing right here change without having to come back through a public hearing or a rezoning process?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's locked in that this is what we're talking about, and if it wants to change to a 7-Eleven or something, they got to come back through.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thanks. That answers my questions, Mr. Chair.
I just want to, for the board's indulgence, I don't see the hearing examiner here, but if you have any questions regarding the results of the hearing examiner, we can always summon them to come over and take a recess. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. I have a question for the county attorney. Is this kind of like the same process before, years ago, before I think many of us were here, like Buckingham Farms went through and other facilities throughout the county? There's a lot of agriculture venues where they protect a residential rural area and turn into either a restaurant or event center. We have them in Fort Myers now. We have some in Buckingham and South Fort Myers. Is this kind of the same process they went through then?
Yes, in some circumstances, based on state law, they were just allowed to do it. From the changes which allows agritourism. If you qualify for agritourism, you have protections under state law that are different than in our normal code. But we have seen a number of venues come through in the past 5 years to do just this, which is to legitimize previous uses or to bring in the ability to do these events and weddings and those types of things. And I want to say all of them have been out in the rural areas.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say, I understand the people's concerns, the neighbors' concerns. It's just unfortunate that this has come forward. The property owner obviously made this decision. I wish they would have worked with your neighborhood first, and maybe the residents of Alva could have collectively got together and maybe purchased this property and made a historical site of it. It'd been great if people could have thought ahead years ago, but unfortunately, the property owner has the right to bring this forward, and here we are today. Commissioner Sandelli?
Just a couple thoughts. One is, obviously, in 2008, there was a vision for a different look at the properties and stuff like that, so a vision going forward that was going to provide some transition over time. I happen to have 2 daughters. The last one is going to get married next year, and I've looked at a few venues, and the typical church wedding has changed to a lot of venues that are a little bit different, and I think that I took that into consideration with looking at the venue here. I do have some concerns about parking and access in any project we talk to. But I think that what the examiner puts together and how they look at things, which is in compliance with the 2008 overlay, if we go against that, it may cause more problems than whatever. That does not relieve me of some of the concerns that I have, as some of the neighbors do. But it is a transition. It's a transition, not only the property, it's a transition of how events are taking place. So a little uncomfortable, but I would defer to the Hicks.
Okay. Any other discussion or a motion of any kind?
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead then and make the motion for approval with conditions as recommended by our hearing examiner.
We have a motion for approval.
I will second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Wayne. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. Next case. We have a feasibility transmittal.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brandon Dunn with the Planning Section. Here today to talk about an update to Map 3A of the Lee Plan. This is CPA 2022-04. This is a county-initiated map amendment. The purpose for the amendments is to update Map 3A of the Lee Plan's transportation map series, which identifies cost-feasible roadway projects. The BOCC directed staff to update the transportation map series to maintain consistency with the MPO's 2045 long-range transportation plan in February of this year. Staff with Lee County DCD and Lee County DOT reviewed the Lee Plan's transportation map series and identified changes that were needed to map 3A for the cost feasible roadway projects to maintain that consistency with the MPO. And those included changing the Alico Road extension from State Road 82 to the existing point where Alico turns from east to west to north to south from 4 to 6 lanes, and to go from the corner of Alico Road and Corkscrew Road to the entrance of Verdana Village from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Staff reviewed the maps, did not identify any other changes that need to be made, and is recommending approval of these changes. Conclusions is that this maintains consistency with the MPO's transportation plan. It's consistent with Objective 36.1 and Goal 42 of the Lee Plan. Staff and the LPA recommend that the Board of County Commissioners transmit the proposed amendments. If you have any questions, we're available.
Any questions for staff? No? Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item?
Good morning, Marcia Ellis. I would like to speak, as I started to review these documents in a short order, that the MPO update for the Lrtp, the right-of-way phase is 2026 through 2030. Construction phase is 2031 through 2035. So we're talking about this construction about 10 years out. Now, I want to just refer for a moment, because I've been spending time with the concurrency report that was prepared in 2021, and I have started to notice some problems with that data. One of the things that I'm looking closely at is an underrepresentation of the level of service for the piece on Corkscrew from Ben Hill up to, from Ben Hill outwards. It's represented as 2-lane or 4-lane when it is actually still a 2-lane, which affects the level of service. I'm also concerned about the proportional relationship when we start looking at the volumes of level of service in that Corkscrew corridor compared to the proposed. And we notice some alarming trends even before we get into the Corkscrew Grove traffic situation. Those proportional relationships are alarming when we consider that we have a 2-lane road where people are going at full speed. Thirdly, I want to point out that we are in effect creating an emergency. Yesterday, I listened to the commissioners talk about the emergency situation at Blind Pass. That was an emergency that was created by nature. It's an act of God, and we are doing what we can to mitigate that. Eventually, we may get to a point where we realize that it is not worth our gain. But the emergency of the traffic on Corkscrew Road is of your own creation. You are responsible for creating that emergency. Yesterday, I heard about tax bonds being approved to work on the Alico Road extension. I've seen people backed up in traffic on Daniels Parkway. I get it. But we are talking about a level of service that places enormous numbers of people at risk. This should be prioritized. 10 years is too long. No one feels safe driving on the Corkscrew corridor. No one. And you guys are responsible for approving these developments that are putting members at risk. How many fatal accidents at full speed have to occur for us to take a more aggressive stance on this dangerous roadway? This is a step forward, but 10 years is 10 years too long. Something needs to happen now. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll come back to the board for a motion. Glad to hear we got support to build some major 8-lane roads now. That's great. So any motion on the transmittal? We have a motion and we have a second on the transmittal. Any other discussion? No objection? Any objections? No. Great. Thank you. Next case.
Good morning, Commissioners. We will start the final adoption hearing for the Kingston project. Before we do that, Mr. Blacksmith would like to address the board.
Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning, Ray.
Our company has been in front of this board multiple occasions over the last decade. And we'd like to state for Joe Camerata, myself, the Camerata family, and the Camerata companies, our sincere condolences to Commissioner Mann's family. Over the last 10 years, we've seen that Mr. Mann's heart and every vote was in the best interest of the county. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this needs to be up here or not. But, good morning, Commissioners. Michael Jacob, Deputy County Attorney. This is the second and final hearing to adopt the development agreement for the project being referred to as the Kingston Project. I have a couple housekeeping items to do. I want to enter into the record the transcripts from the previous board hearing dated June 7th, 2022. The other issues we've discussed at the last meeting, I will not go through those. We'll be here to answer any questions you may or may not have after public comment. Following me, Mr. DeLisi will get up and go through the project and provide an overview of the project and ultimately how the development will work as a comprehensive look. Again, as we go, if you have any questions, please let us know. At the conclusion of public participation, any comments and question period, I would like to come back up and propose a motion for the board's consideration for approval. The county attorney's office continues to recommend approval, and the board adopts the development agreement. I don't know who's doing that. Hopefully I'm not. And then ultimately answer any questions you may have. If there are no questions this time, we'll turn it over to Mr. DeLisi.
Any questions from county attorney at this time? Okay, great, thank you.
Now, if I could take over for this, whoever just, thank you. All right. For the record, Dane DeLisi. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the settlement agreement. I'm not going to repeat last presentation. Michael entered that for the record. But I do want to place the overall settlement agreement within the proper planning context, so you understand what we're looking at and what we're left with through this agreement. As I mentioned last time, we do have a whole team here with me. If you have any specific technical questions on any aspect of this, we do have a team here to answer any questions. So the property, as I'd mentioned last time, it extends from State Road 82 on the north all the way south to the Crew lands, south of Corkscrew Road. And when you look at this, I mean, keep in mind it's a 6,700 acre property. Sense of scale is important. It's a very, very large property. And so what you see, like on the master concept plan, it is larger than it appears. I'll put it like that. But what we have in utilizing, again, from a planning standpoint, utilizing the overall property, the entire property, not just the northern 4,100 acres, is a lot of opportunity for the county to address things like road infrastructure, building a bigger road network like the lady just talked about before. We can actually make a connection from Corkscrew Road to State Road 82 by looking at the entire property and not just a piece of the property. And that road connection, by the way, when you're looking at hurricane evacuation, that's important. State Road 82 is on the state's strategic intermodal system, and you can go in multiple directions from State Road 82. So it allows an alternative access closer in. When we look at the entire property, we look at what's going on to the south with the Crew lands, and anything environmental has a destination south to Crew. If you're water, you're destined south. If you're wildlife, you're destined south. And part of what we're trying to achieve in the density reduction groundwater resource area are those critical environmental connections. So if you don't have the southern areas, it negates a lot of what you're trying to do on the north. If you clean up water only to have to send it again through agricultural areas before it gets to Crew, you lose some of that lift from water quality. If you're trying to manage flows into the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary so that you aid in their restoration, you have no ability to manage it if you're just restoring the north area and then there's an agricultural area to the south of that before you get to Corkscrew Swamp. So having the ability to control water as it flows all the way to Crew is essential in affecting the type of restoration that we're trying to achieve here. It is only to the benefit of the county to include that because of the environmental objectives that we're trying to achieve. So the overall agreement, as I talked about last time, consists of a development incentive for the restoration activities going on site. So it's a 10,000 unit development, phased over time, includes amenity uses, 700,000 square feet of commercial, and a minimum of 3,287 acres of restoration, conservation, flowway, 61% open space, and then a prop share, proportionate share payment for road impacts over impact fees. To get here, we have had a long process. There's been a hearing before the hearing examiner. There's been a separately advertised public information meeting. There's been now the last board hearing and now this hearing. And in the end, we're going to end up with, as I mentioned last time, a plan development that is very similar in nature to the environmental enhancement and preservation overlay that is occurring to the west of here, achieving the same basic goals. So on this plan, which is similar to the master concept plan that will be adopted as part of this, you can see the restoration areas. And as I pointed out last time, these green areas are just the restoration conservation areas, the 3,287. Within the tan areas, you still have additional open space areas, water management areas, water quality areas, and the like. So that's not all specific to development. And the restoration is tied specifically to development. So the development doesn't occur unless a commensurate amount of restoration happens. And that is stated and defined within the development conditions that are also part of this agreement. I do want to note that, I mean, some of these numbers get mind-numbing. I mean, what's the difference between 1,000 acres and 2,000, 3,000, right? 3,287 acres is not an insignificant area, and it's certainly not an insignificant cost. When you look at the restoration activities that have to occur on site, regrading the land, replanting, doing a hydrologic restoration, that's expensive. Just without the cost of land, that's a $40 million value approximately. If the public were going to do it, you'd have to buy the land on top of that and then restore it. So it is a very significant benefit. And in this case, the county doesn't even need to maintain it afterwards. It includes perpetual maintenance. I do want to be clear on what the property looks like today. This was an active citrus grove. This hasn't been for a very long time a pristine area. King Ranch took this property over 5 or 6 years ago, invested a lot of money into the orange grove, into the trees, into the irrigation, and lost it all when Irma came through and decimated the grove. on top of the citrus greening that they're plagued with. So at this point in time, it's a grove that will convert. There's only one question. It's not whether things can remain the same, it's what will that new use be? It could be a mine, or it could be something else. And, you know, I think we all need to thank Camerata for stepping up. Unique developer that looks at the big picture, that solves problems, and has a track record with environmental restoration that can implement a project moving forward that meets the goals of the DRGR and takes what's right now a wrecked citrus grove and moves it into something that I think everyone can be proud of. And they have a record of doing this. You can see these are some of the pictures of the place where they've recreated natural areas where they did not exist just a few years ago. Additional areas for wading bird habitat, additional areas for cleaning water, and in this case, we can clean the water again, going all the way south into Crew. So at the first board hearing, I went through all of the Lee plan policies that we were contravening and how the public interest is still protected. I'm not going to do that again today. I'm just going to leave you again with what the hearing examiner found. And again, she listened to all the testimony and she did not recommend any changes to the development agreement. In her opinion, we were protecting the public interest based on how this was being designed. And I do want to just read again, Corkscrew Grove Limited Partnership will assume the cost of acquisition, clearing crops, backfilling ditches, flattening dikes, berms, removing agricultural structures, etc., in order to restore these lands. It's a very significant task that they're undertaking, and it's very important in fulfilling the goals of the DRGR. And then finally, she concluded that the agreement serves the public interest, notwithstanding the contravention of Lee plan policies that require inclusion into the environmental enhancement preservation overlay. The settlement agreement meets Lee plan objectives for Southeast Lee County DRGR and serves the public interest in protecting, restoring water resources, wetlands, and wildlife habitat. So that's it for my presentation. I do want you to keep in mind the very significant reductions in nutrient loading that will be going south, the significant reductions in water consumption, the amount of water that's going to be returned to the aquifers when this transition happens, and everything else you gain by this settlement agreement, including the elimination of future rock mining on the site. And with that, we'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I have no questions at this time.
No, we're good. He's back.
You didn't take care of everything?
Huh?
You didn't take care of
We're
everything?
done. Okay. No one had any questions in your absence, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant or anything? No, any questions for staff? Okay. We'll go to public comment. We have a few cards here. Laura Henderson. After Laura Henderson, we have Linda Nelson.
Good morning. My husband and I own 2 properties that border the proposed planned development. Our estate home with an in-ground pool is on 5.5 acres. We also have another 20 acres that's a very special place to our family where we've enjoyed bird hunting and other activities for more than 25 years. My husband has previously spoke to you in the past when the King Ranch Group had their, when they were trying to get their variances about blasting right outside of our property lines. And of course, with an in-ground pool, we were very, very concerned. We also had other members of our community that came and spoke before the board about the environmental hazards of mining and how that would have such a negative impact, not only on the wildlife, but for those of us who live there in that neighborhood. I can't tell you how relieved we were that you folks denied that petition. We do believe that Lee County needs home site options that this plan offers, home sites on acre-plus lots. There's nothing like that, I don't believe, in Lee County left. Briarcliff is pretty much built out. I think maybe there's some places in North Fort Myers, but there is a need for this type of a development. On my way here today, it took me 20 minutes to drive 2.2 miles. Our road is underwater. Our land, our property is underwater. My chickens are swimming. We're underwater. And our understanding is that this master plan will alleviate these issues that we are living with and dealing with on a daily basis, especially during summer. The groves are just about dead at this point. If our options are a neighborhood versus a mine, we're going to prefer the neighborhood. The proposed planning would not have a negative impact on our quality of life or change the way we enjoy our land. We look forward to any assistance that the developer will offer Wildcat Farms with drainage and our current road conditions. We are in favor of the proposed planned neighborhood, one that will be good stewards of the land. I believe Kingston can be this steward, and I would like to think that Commissioner Mann would think so as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Nelson.
Hello, good morning. I am a resident of the Wildcat Farms neighborhood, and I really do believe that this development would benefit the community more than the mine in such a highly residential area. And we in Wildcat Farms, or most of us, would prefer a development. There are a few that don't want anything done with the property out there, but we all know that something has to be done with the property. The owners own it, they want it done. As far as the water usage, we're also for that because the aquifers in our area are going to use a whole lot less water. And we are concerned about the flooding, and with this development, they have stated that they will help us out with the flooding on our roads. And I actually have some pictures on my phone to show them after if they would like to see it. But I also think that the property would benefit the habitat more than if a mine goes in. A mine will probably take 35 to 50 years because it's a very large piece of property. And in that time, they're not going to turn anything back to a habitat area until they're done destroying the whole property. Therefore, I am really, really for this development, and I really do hope that the board approves it.
And you're an actual neighbor too, right? You live right next door to the property?
Pardon me?
You live right next door to the property too, right?
Yes, I do. I'm within 100 feet of the property.
Great, thank you for coming down.
Okay, thank you.
Patty Whitehead from Estero.
Good morning, Commissioners. I dedicate my comments in memory of Commissioner Frank Mann. Please do your best to follow his example. Approval of the settlement represents a gross overreach by Corkscrew Grove Limited Partners and overaccommodation by the county of development allowances not supported by the basic requirement of a negotiated resolution under Burt Harris. The 2,474 acres that this development plan allocates for thousands of single-family housing units stretching corner to corner on the south side of Corkscrew Road is a total giveaway to the plaintiff by the county. The very minimal thin bands of restoration around the development pods shown for the south side are directly adjacent to Crew, Audubon, and South Florida Water Management District conservation lands, and will bring wildlife, especially large mammals, into direct interface and conflict with humans and human activity. The numerous massive man-made lakes will be nearly as deleterious to groundwater conditions as a mining lake for the following reasons. The development during the dry season will consume water from a lower confined aquifer through pumping and indirectly transfer it into the superficial aquifer when the surface storage ponds percolate. This can cause a cone of depression in the lower aquifer since the consumption rate can be on the order of millions of gallons per day during the dry season. Pumping for irrigation would be in addition to pumping from other sources for potable water supply exceeding several million gallons a day. Overpumping from the lower aquifer also poses the risk of transferring groundwater pollutants from the deeper aquifer to the surface ponds and superficial aquifer, diminishing water quality over time. The corkscrew corridor is already subject, or will be subject, to massive pumping and drawdown of groundwater. This development will only add to that burden, not alleviate it. The correct course of action for the commissioners would be to send this development plan back to the drawing boards. Confine the Burt Harris settlement agreement to the location and amount of land submitted in the 2019 mining application, which exists only on the north side of Corkscrew Road. Allow increased density along State Road 82, best accomplished through multifamily housing types that can create the possibility for much needed affordable housing stock in the South Lee County housing market. This massive 6,500 acre, 10,000 unit mega project is the epitome of sprawl, as it scraps a much more compact cluster development model already presupposed in the zoning for the north property acreage fronting State Road 82 at 6 units per acre, and trades that efficiency of density off, which would exist on a much smaller footprint, for a spread of 10,000 single family houses units across all 6,500 acres. Particularly on the south side, there's no set aside at all of a large contiguous chunk of land equaling several hundred acres or more for a large wildlife to utilize, as is evident at the Place development and Verdana. The restoration proposed at this site occurs mostly on ribbons of land, essentially only serving to buffer one development pod from another.
Patty, thank you. Your time's up.
I ask for you to deny.
Thank you. Next speaker is Norman Cannon. And after Norma, we have Marcia Ellis. Morning.
Good morning. I'd like to have it in the record.
Can you give it to the
And I
clerk?
have a list of questions that Mr. Blacksmith agreed to answer. I'd like those in the record also. Right. My respects to Mr. Mann, who was a friend of the people. Good morning. Once again, I come before you to speak about a settlement which seems to have been a fait accompli from the very beginning. This settlement is being touted as in the interest of the people. Let's start with this pseudo hearing where concerned citizens are supposed to be allowed to voice their opinions. How can it be in the interest of the people when developers and county personnel are allowed to speak ad infinitum at BOCC meetings and each concerned citizen is allotted a measly 3 minutes? At the last hearing, a timer was being kept on the citizens from the audience, yet the owner, CEO of the development company who was sitting in the audience was allowed to ramble on well past the 3-minute limit. How can it be in the interest of the people when the supposedly neutral county commissioners openly display at the BOCC hearing a bias in favor of this settlement? How can it be in the interest of the people when a respected attorney, Richard Grosso, sent a letter to all the county commissioners, which has been entered into the record, dealing the many ways that this settlement is in violation of present laws and regulations, yet has not been addressed? How can it be in the interest of the people when a copy of the letter from Attorney Grosso ended up in the possession of the owner, CEO of the development company, when that person was not copied on the letter? There are some people who might think this falls under the term collusion. How can it be in the interest of the people when a county commissioner goes on a local radio program touting this project and the people who came to the hearing to voice their approval? All of those people have property adjacent to the development, and the developer has promised to try to alleviate their flooding problems. Then the commissioner remarked with seeming disdain that there were also some environmental activists at the hearing. If this does not exhibit a predetermined bias, then I am at a loss to understand what would. How can it be in the interest of the people when a piece of property that was originally applied for a mining permit for 1,728 acres suddenly becomes a request for 4,000 plus acres 7 years later with another owner in between? How can it be in the interest of the people when the Board of County Commissioners removed map 14, which was put in place to protect said people? Is it a coincidence that map 14 was dropped at approximately the same time the enlarged mining permit was filed? How can it be the interest of the people when a county attorney sees fit to apply two different definitions to the term in perpetuity. How can it be in the interest of people when I asked for an explanation from multiple county departments and received no answer? And the last thing, how can it be in the interest of the people to erect a small city on DRGR land? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Marcia Ellis.
Let me just a second.
No, I got a copy. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I stand before you at a complete loss because I have just found out about this development, and I've been making desperate attempts to reach out to HEX, to reach out to community development, to reach out to the attorney's office to try to get the supporting documentation about this development, about the situation. I just know that trying to fix one legal situation can create other cascading legal situations, and I am very concerned at this point. I'm concerned mainly for a whole variety of reasons, and I cannot even get into it because I don't have time, but the concurrency with the sewage facility really has me fired up because we were promised with the wastewater treatment proposed facility at the end of Alico. I'm sure this comprehensive amendment may strike some familiarity with some of you, that we would find out, that we would have the opportunity to know what was happening with that. And it is referred to in the stipulated agreement. It says that as a condition of development, that they will be responsible for utility infrastructure, and that the county intends to build a new wastewater treatment facility at Alico Road, Alico wastewater facilities. We can look at map 4B. All I can say is this is a problem, and we should have been permitted the opportunity to engage with Camerata companies, to engage with the county, the board, and the people who were putting together this stipulated agreement. Instead, we feel very resentful as a community because we have not been brought into this process, very resentful. So all I can say is that I feel like it would be in the best interest of the community to restart and to have an opportunity to bring the stakeholders who are impacted together so that we can resolve this outstanding issue. We're cooperative people. We want to work with you. We can balance the needs of the environment with the needs of the people. I think that we've demonstrated that in good faith, and we ask for the same good faith to be returned to us. Again, I'm concerned about the over-accommodation. We were in this mess because Camerata chose to do a behind-the-scenes swap with a Conservation 2020 land. My best friend happens to live across the street and has been there since 1986. That is not okay. And therefore, we will continue to challenge this and ask that you restore that good faith by bringing us into this agreement and allow us to work cooperatively with our community. That's what we're asking. Please give us that opportunity to do so before you commit to this stipulated agreement and create a cascade of further problems.
Thank you. Any other, I have no other cards. Any other public comment on this item, please? Okay, we'll come back to the board and, or the county attorney, do you have any comments you want to make after all of the new information? Obviously, some people must have moved here recently because, Michael, just it's kind of off topic, but not related to the water treatment facility. That's something that's been going, our long-range utility projects in our area, of course, in Alico, we've been doing for many years now. Just so any other public listening knows that that's a long-range public utilities treatment facility we've been looking at doing no matter what. And with the prior to this agreement, before this has been going on for 2 years, by the way, it started back 12 years ago. We were looking at because of the growth that consumers have brought to the area because they decided to move here off of Corkscrew, correct?
Correct. The Miss Ellis is correct. She just recently started reaching out to us to get some information, and we've commented to her before the meeting that we will get with her and go through some of her questions. Because there is appears to be a bit of misconception of what's driving what. The county has already been in the process of developing this site, and I think for the Alico wastewater facility, that she's referring to in the comp plan amendment process that it was going through in the past. That hasn't gone through its final approvals. The board has directed some design elements to that. I believe that was a month or so ago. What is required in the development agreement is when that facility is constructed, Camerata, the Kingston project has to connect to it.
I don't think this board or anybody else in this room really wants people on septic. So we're trying to get away from septic, so that's why we're doing this process. So we don't have that. And a lot of people don't realize if you drive through those areas, or like Green Meadows, there's an $82 million facility on the north side of Leak already that people don't know it's there because they can't see it because of the trees. So.
Right. So we've agreed to meet with Ms. Ellis and go through some of her questions and address those concerns.
Not a concern. I'm just making sure everybody knows, publicly know that that was already going on before that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
If the board doesn't have any more questions with regards to the applicant, I do want to put some stuff on the record.
Good.
So, Michael, obviously, can you just go back in history to tell us how we got here, and then simply give us an indication of what are options before us?
Yes, sir. Let me do that.
And I think historically is important. Obviously, there was a vote that took place, obviously, where we are. So I'm just trying to understand. I wasn't on the board, so I'm just trying to understand the history. I've read it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Okay.
If you could clear up some of the false information being divulged by people that's not even here today, probably just sat behind a computer somewhere providing false information about either, it comes down to either you have mine trucks or you have homes, basically. So
let me do that again. I went through at length in the previous hearings, and I will not, I'll try not to let my own personal feelings get into some of those people's comments. Going to the history of this and why we're here. I'm going to go back even further because I think this might actually help Ms. Ellis and some of the people with their questions. The Board of County Commissioners approved a moratorium on mining applications back in the 2008 timeframe. The current IPD that was denied by the board in 2019 was one of those applications that was caught up in that moratorium. And then ultimately, a court decided in favor of the mines to require that the applicants that were in the process be processed through the regulations that were in place in 2007 before the moratorium. The property changed hands over time, and eventually the application came forward and was denied by the board in 2019. The concept with regards to map 14 was in place. Map 14 did not apply to the Estero IPD, the OCP IPD case because the court order that was in place required the Board of County Commissioners to review that application under the 2007 regulations, which existed prior to map 14 and the Dover Coal study and all that came to be, including Chapter 12 of the Land Development Code. What that ended up doing and why people keep going back to map 14, and so it had something to do with this case, is absurd. It had nothing to do with this case. The Board of County Commissioners, using the regulations that were in place in 2017 as required by the court, denied the application. What resulted after that were roughly 3 different lawsuits or legal actions. The first was a writ of cert. The county defended against the writ of cert and won that portion of the case. The property owner also filed a declaration action, a request to the court to say that their application for a mine was consistent with the lead plan and the county was required to approve the mine. We lost that case. They also filed a Bert Harris claim. So people keep referring to Mr. Grosso and his letter about the Bert Harris case. I understand his point, and I agree with many of his points with regards to the viability of a Bert Harris claim under normal circumstances. We are not in a normal circumstance. We lost a case, and I read this in multiple hearings, and I don't know if I need to speak louder for the people in back or what, but we lost that case. And I'll do it again if you indulge me. I will read what that court decided, and that's what applies to this case. And the impact of this decision on the DRGR beyond this site, including the south pieces of property people keep claiming they want to see left alone, the implications of this decision are far-reaching. And we cannot allow this decision to remain. If we lose that appeal, the implications of the words I'm about to, with your indulgence, read, will have an impact on everything in the DRGR. And it's not, I'm not being overdramatic, but I will read the court's decision. And this is where Mr. DeGrosso's opinion may not have taken into consideration the impacts of what we're facing with this decision. I don't know what he's been presented with. But this is the order that is on appeal. The 2007 Lee Plan, within its future land use category of density reduction groundwater resource policy 1.4.5, states unequivocally that natural resource extraction, mining, will be a permitted use at some time in the planning horizon of the plan. The planning horizon being the 2030 planning horizon. The Lee County Board of County Commissioners, Resolution Z18008, denying plaintiff's application for rezoning, did dispositively conclude that a natural resource extraction land use on the site of the subject property will not be permitted due to the board's finding of the incompatibility of such use with nearby current and future land uses. As a result, said resolution is inconsistent with the 2007 Lee Plan, violates the consistency mandate of Section 163-3194, and is invalid as a matter of law. Further, Corkscrew Grove's application for rezoning to the mine is consistent with the 2007 Lee Plan, insofar as the applicant seeks a rezoning for a land use expressly permitted by that comprehensive plan. Now, I will pause for a minute. I will give you my parade of horribles. Our existing Lee Plan provides that mining, natural resource extraction, is a permitted use within the DRGR. Case law to decide about what is speculative uses or not. We have a court order indicating that that is a permitted use and that the Board of County Commissioners is inconsistent with its own comp plan for not allowing that use. It does not take long to understand how you extrapolate that out to every other large piece of property in the DRGR that has that as a permitted use. The individuals who do not want this application to go forward, that want to argue different points, I get it. But the important impact of this is right now at the second DCA is this order, and if we get a decision upholding that decision, that becomes the law of the land. And any other application that comes before you, I will stand up here and I will say, remember this case? We have a judge's order that says this is a permitted use. Now, where does this go for this particular case? The court went further, and the court said, the plaintiff, though is not required by this ruling, may resubmit its current rezoning application to Lee County within a reasonable time without further staff review. The county must then provide a timely hearing before the hearing examiner on the sole issue of conditions to be attached to the rezoning approval. We can argue over Burt Harris law all day long. We will not get to that point. If we lose the case before the second DCA, there will be a hearing before the hearing examiner to review conditions of approval. But here's where it gets worse. Such conditions must be reasonable and be consistent as applicable with other similar mining approvals under the 2007 Lee Plan. The Board of County Commissioners up until, well, I don't know the exact date, I think it was last year, the Board of County Commissioners took the previous setbacks from 150 feet, I believe it was 150 feet, maybe 125, to 660 feet for the blasting, the industrial uses. That did not exist in 2007. And Ms. Nelson, and I forget the lady's name that was up here, talking about being within 100 feet of the the boundaries of this mine. These are the individuals that will be forced to deal with the impact of these mines. Not just them, but their neighbors. So when we get into the discussion about Bert Harris and adding land, not adding land, and whether we're consistent with, we will not get there. I fully expect, if we lose the DCA case, that the mine, there will be a letter to us to not only pay for the fees and costs in accordance with this order, but we also be requested to have that hearing. That hearing would be held in a reasonable time, probably within a matter of a month, and then we will end up with a decision before the board with conditions of approval. I will reiterate to you that the Board of County Commissioners denied the request. Staff recommended approval of that IPD request with conditions of approval. It will not take long for those conditions of approval to be front and center before you, and you will have no choice but to approve a mine. And we cannot do that. I cannot stand before you and tell you as your counsel that it is in the county's best interest to allow this to go forward. The settlement agreement, as it sits today, provides that upon approval by the board, forget about the density, forget about the commercial, the single most important element of this settlement agreement for everybody in this room is the decision by the parties to vacate this order. This order will go away. The impacts of this order will go away. Now, there's been a number of statements raised about the public interest of this settlement agreement. I cannot reiterate the importance of what I just said. However, as Dan DeLisi indicated and other individuals, and again, I apologize for not knowing your name, she hit the nail on the head. The aquifer will be recharged. The density is not being given away. Just like the other environmental enhancement preservation overlay communities, the significant work being redone, restoration, conservation, preservation, continual, perpetual maintenance of those areas will be borne not by the county, but by the applicant. In accordance with our normal procedure with the other EEPO cases, the applicant is receiving density in exchange for that. We are talking about 3,200 acres. The Kiker Preserve is not much bigger. And we paid 43 million, 40-something million for that, and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on restoration. The individual residents that are living nearby will end up with the ability to take drainage off of their sites as the berms come down, and they have indicated the Camerata company will take the water and improve the drainage. It may not help the people in the far back portions of those sites, but it will address the people, the road flooding, coming out in and out of the site will be designed to do that. There is a regional benefit for that. People indicate they have problems with the water quality issues, and somehow the county is going to impact water quality. This site as a whole, the entire site, will be developed and is proposed and conditioned to take the water, treat the water, and disperse and discharge the water south to the crew lands, treated. If you do not have this, if you have what some individuals are clamoring for, a strip of land that would be nothing more than agricultural or something else, mind you, that would end up creating a problem, as Dan indicated, where you have clean water mixing with the agricultural water to be then dispersed that we will have no control over. The development agreement addresses that. We've talked about the preservation of the flowways and the restoration of the corridors. That's not going to be restated. But I want to leave you with this. If the county does not approve this settlement, and there's a mine, we still have the Bert Harris claim to deal with, and we will go and we will defend the county as best we can under those circumstances. One of the main charges with the Bert Harris claim is, in fact, that the property owner has either a vested or existing use. While they may not have an existing use for a mine, they have a court order that currently says they have a right to mine. If that decision remains, that will be, and I tell you today, will be probably the #1 exhibit in their claim against the county. That claim currently sits at $63 million. Over time and interest, and of course we would defend that, so the time and interest component will expand. So you're looking at between $63 and $100 million. on top of, we have a hearing to approve a mine. I cannot tell you, cannot reiterate to anyone listening that actually wants to listen, that the county's best interest is not fighting this. The county's interest is not denying this request. We have a reputable company that is stepping in to purchase the property, to maintain the property, to take the property and convert it from what you saw in pictures. And I will tell you, I went out on a site visit with the hearing examiner, county staff, Mr. Camaretta's son, and Mr. Blacksmith, and I will tell you, I did not see anything pristine out there that was worth preserving. What I did see was a series of developments from the place in Verdana with stages of restoration that is being conducted that far exceeds what exists there today. And what you will find after we go and we start amassing all the public interest and benefits, that the number one thing I want this to happen is this order be vacated. We cannot express enough that that order has to go away. Finally, I have prepared in response, in recommendation from the county attorney's office, the following motion for approval, and I will read that into the record if there are no other questions.
You good, Commissioner White? So, again, I appreciate the fact that you've explained this and brought us up to speed. So we deny this as an alternative, either go forward with the settlement or we deny this. We deny this, we go to the DCA. How do appeal cases generally go? I mean, outcomes of appeal cases, are they, you know, in our favor that we probably would prevail? Is that normally what takes place in appeal cases?
I have a somewhat jaded look of this second DCA, and I apologize to those judges for that. But we recently had a case, not even a month ago. We had oral argument, and this case was a slam dunk. Literally, it was a slam dunk. We had case law from the second DCA supporting our position, and the second DCA denied our appeal, PCA'd it. We didn't even get a written decision. And I can't tell you that I have any confidence in a decision being made there, but on the flip side of it, we will defend the board as best we can under the circumstances. If that doesn't work out, yes, you're right. We're in a position of a mine.
And again, you know what, having had a lot of professional experience, having worked for a Fortune 100 company and my own companies, I haven't felt the court system, first of all, to be an area where I'd like to have, and no disrespect to any judge, someone decide my fate, but appeals, in my historical experience, having come from the reinsurance side, have not necessarily always gone well. If anything, they've actually gone much against you. And that's been my experience. So to simplify this, it's denial, come up with the money to pay, okay, which it has to come out of the general fund. And I don't know if people have looked at our balance sheet, but $100 million is going to have a significant hit, or structure it. Or we go forward with the only option, because I'm assuming nobody else has reached out to say, we have another alternative. This is the alternative we have. And we have a July hearing. Is that correct?
We have a review. Our extension with the second DCA is July 27th. And that's, thank you for bringing it up, because a lot of people are claiming this is a rush job and somehow not transparent and all this other stuff. We are under the gun. We've already received 2 extensions. We do not have the time and energy to guess whether the second DCA is going to let us have another one.
So simply put, we have 2 options, denial or settlement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Hammond, did you want to say something before he reads the motion?
Oh, I was hoping he'd read it so I can make
Okay,
the motion for
perfect.
approval.
Michael, go right ahead, please.
It's lengthy, but this is, based on the evidence and presented at the hearings, the hearing examiner's recommendation, the motion for approval is this. The motion to approve the development agreement, adopting the hearing examiner's findings, inclusions, including but not limited to finding that the settlement agreement and development agreement as conditions serve the public interest, notwithstanding contravention of the Lee Plan policies that are required as part of the environmental enhancement and preservation overlay, and the objectives of the Southeast Lee County DRGR, and that they serve the public interest in protecting, restoring water resources, wetlands, and wildlife habitat. Include the finding that the relief granted through the settlement agreement and development agreement protect the public interest served by the county regulations at issue, the ones that have been contravened. Finding that the development agreement, including the conditions of approval, are the appropriate relief necessary to prevent the government regulatory effort from inordinately burdening the property, and finding the settlement agreement and the public hearing process utilized to review and approve the development agreement protects the public interest served by the state statutes being contravened in order to provide the development agreement, and that the relief provided is appropriate and necessary to prevent the governmental regulatory effort from inordinately burdening the property. And finally, the finding that the proposed settlement agreement and development agreement meet the requirements of Chapter 70.01 Florida statute.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion? I will second that. You both did at the same time. Commissioner Wayne, we're going to grab you then. Commissioner Raines, a second on that. Any other discussion? Any objections? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. We are adjourned.